Vern. This is my third presentation, the informative presentation. Let me show you my audience before we get started. Today's presentation is on the hippie culture. The hippie culture came into existence in the 60s. Teenagers, in their late teens and early 20s, began to strike out and rebel against the modern society. They did a lot of crazy things. They did some drugs. They protested the war. They listened to psychedelic music, evil stuff there. Had lots of sexual encounters. Now, somehow, as surprising to modern society, they survived, and these survivors are now in their 60s and 70s. Now, according to Paul Ray, a business consultant, and Sherry Anderson, a psychologist, in their 2000 book, The Cultural Creatives, there are around 50 million people that are still part of this hippie culture. Now, the hippie culture can be explained with three easy things: sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Now, let's start off by making love, not war, and talking about the sex. There was an idea of free love. Birth control pills became available for sale in the early 60s, and that helped spur this into place. They had numerous partners. This is kind of a little different now in modern times, but then it was definitely against modern society to cohabitate outside of wedlock. And they also had a new acceptance or attitude towards homosexuality. Now, with all that, there were consequences. The sexually transmitted diseases, the amount of those went up, and women were objectified. W. Roraba, a professor of history at the University of Washington in Seattle, said in a September 27th article in the History News Network, "Eventually, many hippie women came to see free love as a male sexual fantasy that did not meet the women's needs." Might still be the same. Anyway, the results. It was the beginning of the women's movement. And society has a better acceptance of gay and lesbian lifestyles. Now let's discuss getting a little high. Let's talk about the drugs. The use of drugs was rampant. They smoked a lot of marijuana. They used LSD or acid. They even tried things such as mushrooms. The consequences to that were there were dangerous side effects such as violence that could have led to depression and sometimes suicides. Also, there was an increase in people struggling with drug addictions. The results, though, it was discovered that there was a positive aspects to the use of medical marijuana, and some states now, such as Colorado, have discovered that there are some true financial benefits to legalizing recreational marijuana. Now it's time to get groovy with some music. Let's talk about rock and roll. There was a movement from pop rock into more of a blues rock. The Beatles led the way when they changed their sound to more of a rock and blues sound. American performers such as Jefferson Airplane, Bob Dylan, and the Grateful Dead released their own versions of blues rock, folk music. Festivals like Woodstock, which is the most popular of all of them, became very popular and still are today. Consequences. Woodstock caused the largest traffic jam in history. 3 days of backlog over 10 miles. The Beatles broke up. Well, that probably wasn't the hippies' fault, but it needed to be said. And the results. The groundwork was laid for today's classic rock and roll. The modern day music festivals are extremely popular around as annual destinations even to this day. In fact, in Florida, in Central Florida Future, Dee Marin discusses in her article, Then and Now, New Age hippies reflect on iconic trends. The modern day hippie would rather spend money on attending festivals than buying material goods. As we recover from the party, let me wrap up. The hippie culture had some crazy times with its beliefs in sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I'll close with a quote from Albert Bates, a New York University Law School graduate who lives at the Farm, a several hundred member commune in Tennessee, and he's lived there since '72. He provides us with the insight on the future generation of hippies when he says, "Today's hippies aren't that different from those 30 years ago. They just know how to stay out of trouble better."